Hi again everybody, it's Adam Benson here. Following on from the introduction, this is the first video in a series of creating this particular NASA concept, the Stanford Torus, or my take on it anyway. So I'm going to take you through the process as much as possible from beginning to end, right from the initial stages of creating the base model through any design ideas and considerations as we go along, all the different modeling we need to do. Texturing, lighting, right through to the final render and post-processing. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is rather show you with some embarrassment a rather poor sketch I did in Photoshop, which really is only for my benefit, so you're very lucky to get to see it. This is basically just to show you the profile. This is what I want to generate inside this, or this is the profile I want to generate this torus from. So I will explain, because I don't think it's that self-explanatory. This is obviously the top of the dome, as it were, the domed roof, which is essentially the inside of the torus as it disappears off into the horizon and goes round all the way. What I've decided to do is some of them are depicted in the NASA colonies as like a perfect cylindrical form or a circle, and but what I've decided is to have a sort of a tiered, staggered sort of stepped environment. So I can make use of these different terraces to place people on, and trees and other different things within the environment. So my intention with this is to have these this profile. As you can see here, that I've got what's going to be a terrace, and big enough to hold some decent sized trees and people, obviously. So maybe this will be paved, just maybe grass patches and whatever. It'll just be like a terrace environment that looks out, basically be a viewpoint down into the habitat as well as outside into space. Here I'm looking at maybe making 3 stories of accommodation that's built into the wall. Then there'll be another terrace with some more trees and garden patios or whatever, and an angled, these might both be angled actually, angled terraces going down. This maybe about 6 stories, and the idea of having some various balconies and terraces standing out from this in some certain places, and then another terrace, a walkway with some trees and such like on it, and then it drops down in the actual profile deeply into the bottom of the habitat, and this will contain the landscape and the water component. So I'm going to make this quite hilly, and some trees, foresty areas further along, some parkland going down to a river that's going to snake all the way up and out of our viewpoint. Probably with various sort of wider areas, ponds, lakes or whatever, depending on the scale, as we go along. And I'm thinking of making it a little bit different, rather than just sort of echoing what's on that side over here. I'm thinking about making this more of a slightly softer side, less sort of harsh terrain, or less hilly anyway, wandering down to maybe a shoreline that runs into the water here, bit of a beach. So, they'll have some sandy textures or whatever on it as well. Maybe some trees. And then again, the same, this will be echoed though, that, the terraces and trees and accommodation on the other side. So, I mean, my thinking in this is that in an environment like this, you wouldn't necessarily have the agriculture and everything, well, all the way around the cylinder. The thing I want to really focus on is making a nice, pleasant habitat, a place where you'd perhaps just want to hang out. A bit like a seaside resort in space. So that's the general idea. The final thing I want to show you is up here. I'm thinking about having a transport hub. I have rails that sort of run the entire way around the cylinder, and maybe we'll have these, two-way sort of train system hanging from the ceiling, with hubs where people can get off and travel, I assume, down tubes or something that in the structure that take us down to this environment, or maybe even in the superstructure, you'd have from the hub itself in the middle of the ring, you'd have spokes coming out that obviously sometimes come all the way through and intersect with the environment. So maybe we'd do that. But what I'm trying to do is keep the environment as clear as possible, so that the viewpoint is not obstructed as you go all the way up. You look away into the distance and follow it up. So that's my embarrassing sketch. You're very lucky to have seen it. So my first job really is to create this spline profile that I want to use to create the torus. So I'm going to go into the front view, and I'm going to be using the spline tool, the spline pen tool, to draw this shape out. The first thing I'm going to do actually is to make this grid. I don't know how this view, what it looks like to you in the capture, but the grid is not very clear to me. So to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go into the preferences and change the colors. This is in the scheme colors, editor colors, by the way. I'm going to make the major grid a bit darker, and I'm going to make the main grid a bit lighter, just to make it a bit easier to see while I'm creating this spline, because I'm going to be counting these blocks for my spacing. Okay, the next thing I need to do is put snap on, so I can get the pointer to snap to these various grid marks. So I'm going to press P down on the keyboard and enable snap. Also I'm going to press P again and go to work plane snap, as well as grid point snap. So now you can see that I snap to the various grid lines. So I'm going to go up to the pen tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is make my viewport fill the screen by holding down Control and Tab. If I click on it and Control and Tab, then it sort of fills the screen, which gives me a lot more room to work with. And I'm probably going to zoom out a little bit, at least I can see the grid lines. Now I'm going to start over the right hand side, probably just at the base of the, if I quickly flick to here, I'm going to start the profile here and then work this out as I go along, see how wide I want the arc to be, and then join it up again from there. So let's start down here, start on one of the major lines, and I'm going to take that up maybe 1.5 blocks and go across 4, I think. And then I want this to go up at an angle, a bit of an incline, and I'm thinking that this is going to be sort of about maybe 6 stories tall. So I'm going to utilize this grid point as a measurement thing, as a measurement scale, and I'm going to go up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 and across. What angle do I want to be? That's probably about right. Go across another 4 for another terrace, and then I want to go across at an angle again, and I want this to be about 3 stories, so I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, slightly less angle, and again across 4 to the top terrace, up 1, and then I'm going to switch over to, whoops, not staying in there, Control Tabs to get back to my spline tools. I'm going to go to the spline arc tool. I'm going to Control Tab out again to fill my viewport, or fill my interface with my viewport. And I'm going to come across here, and I'm going to try and work out the spacing here. So I've got, this is the center point, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.1 blocks across from the main. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.1 down to what height? 4 up from that line down there. There. No, there. Now the next thing I can do is, now I've still got this selected, I can go to the middle point and I can just adjust the arc. So I'm going to zoom out again a bit further and decide, I don't want it to be a full hemisphere, so I think I don't want it to be too shallow. I think maybe about there is right. Press escape. And then I'm going to just tab back to the pen tool. Control tab back out again. Click on that point again. And zoom in. Let's just zoom in. And now I need to go down 1. Across 4. This is where I need to see the other side again. Zoom out again. And we come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. And 4 in from that major line. So is that right? So that's the one. 4 across. And then we come down to 4 away from that line. How many down? 5 down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's correct, I think. Down. Down to the base. And across. And there we have our complete spline. That looks about right. Cool. Let's just control tab back to the main interface. Okay, so now we've got our spline profile of the habitat. I do want to tweak it a little bit. I want to add this area up here for the hub. Add that into the actual the profile. So I'm going to do that by selecting a end side spline preset, and I'm going to scale that down and move it up to the roof. Might be worth actually turning off snap now, because this can throw you out when you're working. It can place things where you're not in control of it really. So hold down P, turn that off. I'm just going to move down a little bit. Now, how big do I want this to be? Given the scale here, we're going to have trees on this. People will be about, well, yay tall. Probably a little bit bigger. Okay, now I'm going to join these together by using a Spline Mask object, and you just drag the 2 splines in, and then go to your Spline Mask settings and switch. That's currently set to union, so if I set it to A subtract B, change the order, no, that should be right. What's going on with that? Oh, there you go. I don't know what's going on there, but there's our amended profile. I don't think there's anything else I want to do to it to change. I think I'm probably going to keep this version. It's a good idea to, as much as possible, keep live versions of any of your stages so that you can go back to them if you need to tweak, rather than having to recreate. You know, I need to keep this spline and any of these other elements, because if I have to go back again at some point in the future to edit this shape or decide that, oh no, that wasn't quite right, then it's annoying. I've got to draw this again. So I'm going to keep this version, and I'm going to use the current state to object command. So as you see, we kept the original, which I'm just going to turn off, and I'll go to my newly created spline. So let's just change this to habitat profile. And what I'm going to do here as well is make sure that I've got enough detail on this spline in the curves. Because if I zoom in, they're a little bit flat. So maybe I'll just go down to 1. And not linear, would be Bezier. Oh, let's go back again. That's not what we want. Let's change this before we make it editable. Spline. Let's try that down at 1. Alt 2. Let's have a look. Maybe even 1. I want to make sure this is nice and round and smooth. Yeah, that should be fine. So again, select all of those, object, current state to object. We can turn those off, move them down below. In fact, this is probably a good time to just create a null, which is Alt G on the keyboard, and just call this spares. So using the rectangular selection, I'm going to select these points, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to add a little bit of a chamfer on the edge of this. So let's go to Mesh, Spline, Chamfer, and just drag. I think I'm going to have it flat actually. I don't want anything too rounded, but I want to have a non-sharp edge. Let's see, look at that close up. Do I want it flat or rounded? My instinct tells me to do it flat, and then I can adjust. Let's go back. And then I can adjust if I need to add any softening or extra bevels later on when it's a mesh object. But I just want to take the hard edge off. So I'll do that there, and I think I'm going to do the same. Press H to see the whole profile. I'm going to do the same on the edges of these here. Just zoom into one of them really. Just add a little bit. Go to my last used tools, chamfer. I could use the same setting again, so it looks like. That's probably enough actually. Let's just zoom in. Yeah, that's okay. Most things in the real world don't have a very sharp edge, particularly on a sort of structure on the scale of this. So although you wouldn't necessarily see any sort of alteration in between the two surfaces, a rounding or whatever, it will make a difference in the way the light catches it, and when we're close up, zoomed into any of these areas, then it's better to see a little bit of a softened or a rounded off or beveled edge, I think. Okay. So that's that. Now, the decision now is basically how we create or use this profile to create our torus. And I'm just going to do an obvious thing first, just so we can have a look at the actual form of this. Again, press H to zoom to your view, or to zoom around the object. I'm just going to place this inside an extrude object. So I'm holding down Alt, clicking on the menu here and selecting extrude, and that places the spline immediately inside the extrude. I'm going to extend this out to, let's go to 100. It's a long way, but I just want to get an idea of what this will look like using a bend deformer. So I'm going to drop one of those in, and I'm also going to, the bend deformer works by being an influence either underneath, inside an object, or within a group that an object exists in. So I need to get all these together, do an Alt G to group, and then the bend deformer should be active. Now it won't bend anything at the moment, simply because, well, it'll bend it in one direction. It's probably pointed the wrong way anyway. But it won't bend anything in the length of this object because there's no subdivision. So go into the extrude, go to subdivision. I'll type in 100 again on there just to get some subdivisions. And we need to alter the orientation of this bend object. Now let's just turn it on to see what it's doing. Okay. So I need to rotate it 90 degrees that way. I'm holding down shift as I do this. If I start turning the rotation wheel and then press shift, it'll lock to 10-degree increments, which makes life a little easier. And I'm going to do the same in that orientation. Let's see, has that created a bend that we want? No. Let's have a look. That should be set to unlimited. Let's just change that down to 1. So here we can get an idea of what it looks like in a curved profile. I think the best thing to do is to turn off the end caps. Switch to none. And then we can zoom in and have a look. Let's get some idea. Another thing that'd be useful to do here is go into your extrude object, go to the basic tab and click on X-ray. That way we can see what happens here as the profile disappears up. Let's make that longer. Let's make it 200 meters. Just going to hide the box for the bend. I'm going to throw a camera in here as well because this needs to be viewed with a wider or a shorter lens, wider angle. Let's click on that to do that. I'm going to use the 1, 2 and 3 keys here to navigate around this scene instead of using these all the time. 1 just moves you around, 2 zooms you in and out, 3, it's not zoom actually, it's dolly in and out, I think is the right term. 3 rotates you around the viewpoint. So I'm just going to move myself over to one of the sides here. Click on the camera. Oops. It's not moving very flowingly. That's a word. There we go. There we go. I'm kind of thinking that this is probably something like the viewpoint I want to have in the final image. But as you know, we can try that as we go along. And I'm probably going to make this a wider, certainly wider than typical widescreen HD. Something that's a bit more akin to, well, more of a cinematic ratio, really, so that we can get as much of this spacing as possible and make it more dramatic. But I'm thinking it'll probably be a viewpoint over here on one of the sides. So something I need to consider is the divisions that I'm going to need as I go around as well. I don't want too many straight edges in this at all. So again, just an experiment. I'm just going to turn this up. Say 300. Yeah, maybe more. Let's go to 5. I don't normally work with this many polys, but I think given the scale of this and everything I want to do, then I need to make it as smooth as possible. And I certainly don't want to be using hypernerbs or anything. I need to get it to be all hard edge structure. So that's my thinking. Now we could use this method. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if I go out again, we don't really need. No, wrong viewpoint. Oops. What do we got here? That's the front view. What do we got here? Top. Let's go right. There we go. I could get away with using this method exactly as it is to create this particular part of this ring colony, because at the end of the day, I'm only doing this for an illustration point of view. I'm not animating this really. So I could, in theory, just have this for this using this bend deformer, and then put all the environment on this in its unbent state, and then simply use the bend deformer to deform it and bend it up out of our view. But the problem is, this is very detailed. I need there to be a lot of structure around here, and external to the actual glass dome. I want to view some kind of structure which explains how this thing is held together. Obviously, these things don't just they're not just going to be a thin shell. It's going to have a framework around it. So rather than having to create that framework over the entirety of this object, the most logical way to do it would be to create one section of this in a curved state, and then put all the structure on it and then clone it. And I think that's probably what I'm going to do. It'll just minimize the amount of work needed. There's no point reproducing everything over and over again when you can simply clone it along the length of the object. So this is a great way of just getting an idea of how this might work, and already I like what I'm seeing, but we need to find a better way of doing it, or getting a section that we can clone. So we'll move on to that next. So I need to return this so I need to resume. So I need to return this to its original state. The only thing I need to save really is the spline mask out of that last experiment. Press O to zoom to it on the keyboard. The most sensible thing to do, I think, is to create the entire ring as a mesh object that I can then cut up and just use a section and then clone that section. So the logical way of doing that is to use a sweep object and a circle spline. First thing I'm going to do is rename this spline mask to habitat profile, and I need to stick the circle under the sweep and then put the habitat profile above it. So we're telling it to sweep this object around this one. So I'm going to increase the scale of that circle. As you can see, the profile is the wrong way around. So I'm just going to go into my axis modification mode, click on that, click on rotate, and I'm try and rotate it. No, that's the wrong way. No, wrong way as well. It's always going to be the last one. There we go. 90. There we go. So I need to work out how big this ring needs to be. It's going to be significantly bigger than that, I think. Let's just zoom out again. I'm just going to display this with garrote shading. Get rid of the mesh lines for a minute. How big is that? I'm going to say 250. Whoops. We do not want an ellipse. Let's do that here. So 125. And the thing to do is to take our camera inside the ring. Take a little bit of navigating, but look at the camera one. I'll zoom out again a little bit. There we go. Center of the scene. Here we go. It's always fun navigating at this scale. There we go. Select the camera. So I'm going to put the go to quick shading lines instead. You can see we're going to need a lot more subdivisions on this. Do we do that here? here. In fact, that's probably going to have to be set to natural and done that way, or should we do it subdivided or uniform? There we go. Might make more sense. I'm going to do the same as I did last time. Actually, click on the sweep object, go to Basic tab, and click on X-ray so I can view it with some invisibility. I think that kind of looks about right in terms of the. Oops. Just want to roughly get the viewpoint I had before, which was wider, of course. Just to see if we've got enough scale in the ring as it disappears off. You know, decide the thing that's going to be different, obviously, if I make the ring bigger, is how much this kind of goes off into the horizon, you know, as it curves up. And I think probably that's far enough. Again, if you consider that there's going to be trees on here that are probably this sort of size, this tall, in this place here. This is a pretty big space. So I think that's probably adequate. The thing I just need to make sure is that I've got enough subdivisions as we go around, as we looked at before, because I want these lines to curve smoothly. Let's turn the lines off again for a second. Go to garage shading. Oh, this is a problem. I'll turn the X-ray off again so I can see the solid object a bit easier. Okay, just going back to the lines again. I'm going to come out of the object and have a look at it so I can see what the subdivisions are like from the side. I think I maybe need to give it a little bit more. Put that back. Yeah, I mean that is a lot of polys. I don't normally like working with that many. Particularly, but I think this is going to be necessary. And at the end of the day, we only have a small section of this, which we're going to clone. So I'm probably better off to have more and have it smooth than less and give away the illusion. So I'm going to go with that. Whoa, that's dense. Right. Switch that to garage shading. So once again, I'm going to select this object, object, menu, and current state to object. So now I've got a mesh version of this, and I've still retained my original, so I'm going to grab that and stick that inside spares, because I will come back and need that again in the future. And now I will have to use the lines again. And I'm going to have to go. In fact, let's switch to a side view. Just going to turn that camera off. I'm trying to find my center point, which is obviously just here, and decide how much of this section I want to take. And I'm looking at this and I think it probably will be this 2 blocks worth here will be enough for me to add some structure on it and then just simply clone it. So I'm going to use the polygon selection tool. Zoom out a little bit, level it up. I'm using these grid lines as a bit of a guide. to the section I take because I want it to be equal. In fact, do increasing the contrast of these main ones. Let's go to preferences, down to scheme colors, editor colors, major grid. I'll make that darker. Will it be visible in here? Oh, actually, that'll do. Let's just do that for a second. I can always change that back. This makes it a bit easier for me to see. Right, I'm going to draw a line from there down along with these polygons and across. Using the 1 key to move, hopefully. No, start again. Right. Oops. There we go, they're both in view now. Let's go to there, down to there, over to there. That's correct. Would help very much if I was in polygon mode. Right, try again. To there. There we go. Now, apart from a bit of a mishap here, that looks like that's equal, so let's just draw another one around here. Okay, let's go back to the main view. And what I'm going to do is go to Mesh, Commands, and Split, which will separate out that section for me, which is here. So I'm going to keep this the whole mesh. I'm just going to rename that now. Habitat Profile Mesh. Stick that in spares for now. And then this one, we call that Habitat Section. Now, what I want to do is put the axes in the center of this section. So I go to Mesh, Axis Center, click Execute, and then that will have put that in the middle of the section. I need to turn this off so that I can move this up. Oops. Go to Object Mode, move this to the middle of my scene, press O to zoom in, and there we have our section to clone. So the method to do this is going to be, we're going to get a cloner for a start, put the habitat inside it, and we need to sweep this or clone this as an object. So switch the mode to object, and we're going to clone it around. I'm just going to make a copy of this ring, circle, and I'm going to clone it around that because we already know that's the right size, since that's the ring we used to create the thing in the first place. I'm just going to have to change the orientation of the object, or the object. Let's go 90 here, I think 90 there. There we go. Now obviously this is full of gaps, so we need to fill the spacing, and there's probably different ways of doing this, but I'm going to try this using the step method based on the size of this section. So it's 21.37, so I'm going to try entering that here. Let's have a look and see what. We're not quite meeting up, so it's a bit less than that. Well, let's put smooth rotation on as well, that seems to help. put it on to 20.8. Not quite. 20.6. Looks like there's a bit of an overlap. About 20.7. Okay, so somewhere between the two. 20.67. Oops. Not 767. That's 66. I don't mind a little bit of overlap. It's better than a gap. That's still a gap at the moment. So let's try 20.65. Full. It's gone over the top. 4.5. There we go. That's close enough, I think. Actually, I just realised I've got an extra cloner here. I must have duplicated it when I duplicated the circle out of the spares. So that's the useless one. Delete that. Okay, let's move on and decide what we're going to do next. Now, actually, if I just zoom out again, I realise that I don't need, like I said at the beginning, actually, I don't need to have all of these cloned around entirely around the ring, since my viewpoint's only going to be, you know, maybe a quarter of it. So an alternate method I could use would be to switch this from distribution of step to even and alter the offset. So let me just start the offset at the bottom. That'll be 75%. And then alter the end that might be the better way of doing it, then I'm not cloning more than I need to, and certainly when it comes to render time it'll make a difference. So what I'm going to do to make my life easier actually is to move this camera, oops, not turn it on, just want to move it down to the base, or to be inside this structure. So let's just alter the rotations. Actually that needs to be 90 that way, minus 90 rather, and 0 out on X and Z. Oops, no, I need that in that position. So if I just click on that now, there we go, with dead center, it's going to make it a lot easier to navigate around. So let's go back into that again actually, and then alter the cloner from within here. Before we do that, let's put on X-ray in the basic tab so we can see the arc of the station moving away. I'm just going to come to our possible viewpoint to make sure that we've got enough clones in there. Let's just reduce that down actually. Let's go to 8 and alter this offset. Sorry, not the offset, leave that where it is. We want the end. Yeah, I'm going to go back up to 10 just to make sure I've got enough in there. In fact, let's make it 11. I'm just going to go through the process again of making sure they're separated enough. It's not as fine doing it this way, but if I can do it like this, 27.5, yeah, 27.3, 4, 3.5. I'm just going to come out of that camera again. Zoom in with my editor camera. Let's look at these joins. See if that makes any difference. Smooth. Yeah, it's the same. So we need to alter this a bit more. The other way, in fact. Does that make the loop? Not a lot. I think I'm going to go the overlap. I'm sure there's a mathematical solution to this so that this lines up exactly without any errors at all, but I'm not entirely sure what that is. But let's go back in there and have a look. That may be noticeable. It's better with it on. I might even go back to the circle being the size it was, which was 125. It's still cloning to that, isn't it? What's going on here? Oh, I didn't update. Let's just move the camera down again. This viewpoint. Camera. Move to there. And let's tweak this again. This is a lot of faffing about going backwards and forwards, but these different methods seem to calculate the way this is cloned somewhat differently. So that's probably even going to be 26. Oh, so 9. Okay, so 28.5. I'm going to come out of this one again. Look at the join. Looks a bit better. Again, going the wrong way again. Remember what you're doing, Adam. 28.8, 28.9. Do you know what? I think I'm going to keep that as an overlap. I don't think that's that big a deal, actually. It's just one set of polygons, and at least it should cover that gap up. It renders. Yeah, I think it should be okay. Okay, I think that's probably the more efficient way of doing this, because we are only cloning what we need, or what we need to see in our viewpoint, and at the end of the day, we can always use one of the other methods if we decide we want the whole ring because we need it to cast a shadow, or you know, even if we decide to animate going around it, we can add the clones we need at a later date. So this is probably the best way. Right, let's just save that and move on.